The air in the lavish, dimly lit office was thick with a silence that pressed down on Anya like a physical weight. Every expensive furnishing, every polished surface seemed to mock her small-town origins. Across the vast mahogany desk sat Mr. Kim, the notoriously cold and powerful head of the Black Dragon Syndicate. He hadn't even graced her with a glance, his attention seemingly absorbed by a document held loosely in his manicured hand. Anya's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the backdrop of her impending doom. Just moments ago, a stern, impeccably dressed man had informed her that her family's debt, an astronomical sum incurred by her reckless older brother Jinwoo, was now due. It was an impossible amount, a figure that dwarfed their humble guest house and their entire life savings. She had traveled all the way from her quiet village in Gangwon-do, a journey filled with growing dread, only to be met with this stark, unyielding reality. She had braced herself for pleas, for desperate negotiations, perhaps even for threats, but nothing could have prepared her for what came next. Finally, Mr. Kim slowly lifted his head. His eyes, sharp and unreadable, pierced through her, making her feel as though he could see straight into her soul, dissecting her fears and her vulnerability. His gaze held no warmth, no pity, only a chilling, calculating intelligence. He spoke then, his voice a flat, almost bored monotone that sliced through the tense silence. "You will pretend to be my wife for 1 year. The debt will be forgiven." Anya's mind reeled. The words hung in the air, surreal and utterly bizarre. This wasn't what she had expected. She had imagined herself begging, pleading for mercy, or worse, facing the terrifying prospect of her family losing everything. Instead, this powerful, dangerous man was offering a deal that seemed plucked from a dramatic television series. Pretend to be his wife? For an entire year. The sheer audacity of it left her momentarily speechless. 1,000 questions flooded her mind, but one, more pressing than the others, bubbled to the surface. She took a deep breath, surprised by the sudden surge of composure that allowed her to voice it. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the tense silence, a fragile thread of defiance in the face of his immense power. "Does that mean we share a bed?" Mr. Kim's eyes, which had been impassive moments before, now held a flicker of something unreadable. He raised an eyebrow, a subtle gesture that sent a shiver down Anya's spine. He leaned back in his luxurious chair, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a predatory curve that hinted at hidden depths. "That depends on you, Miss Lee." The full weight of what this proposal meant, the complete upheaval of her life, the loss of her independence, her dreams of becoming an artist, hadn't fully hit her yet, but the seed of it, cold and sharp, had been planted deep within her. It was a terrifying prospect, an unthinkable sacrifice, yet the alternative was even grimmer. Her family, her elderly parents, her ambitious younger sister, would be ruined, their lives shattered by Jinwoo's recklessness. A thought, dark and unsettling, crossed Anya's mind. Sometimes, the devil you know is better than the one you don't. Was this man, this notorious syndicate head, truly the lesser of two evils? Or was she merely stepping from one trap into a far more dangerous one? Mr. Kim gestured to a thick stack of papers on his desk, pulling her back from her swirling thoughts. "Sign these. Your new life begins tomorrow." Anya stared at the documents, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. What kind of life was this going to be? What lay hidden beneath the surface of this impossible offer? The questions multiplied, each one heavier than the last, but the choice, she knew, had already been made. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Anya's world, before the chilling proposition in Mr. Kim's office, was a stark contrast to the opulent, intimidating surroundings of a Seoul syndicate head. She had grown up in a small, traditional village, nestled deep within the mountains of Gangwon-do, a province renowned for its breathtaking natural beauty and a pace of life that felt centuries removed from the bustling metropolis. Here, life unfolded rhythmically, dictated by the seasons and the ancient customs of the land. Rice paddies shimmered under the summer sun, their emerald green stretching to the horizon, while old wooden houses, weathered by time, huddled together against the crisp mountain air. The pervasive scent of pine trees carried on the gentle breeze was the perfume of her childhood. Her family ran a modest guest house, a haven for weary travelers seeking respite from the city. It was a simple establishment, serving hearty, unpretentious Korean food, prepared with love and generations of culinary wisdom. Life was slow, centered around the unwavering pillars of community, a profound respect for elders, and the relentless dignity of hard work. Neighbors knew each other's joys and sorrows, sharing in both with an intimacy that was both comforting and at times stifling. Her parents, kind souls with hands calloused from years of labor, were also strict, upholding traditional values with an unwavering resolve. They believed in deference, diligence, and the importance of family honor above all else. Her younger sister, Mina, was the family's bright star, ambitious and studious, her head always buried in books, dreaming of a future beyond the village. Then there was Jinwoo, her older brother, the unpredictable storm in their otherwise tranquil lives. He was charming, restless, and perpetually chasing the allure of quick money, a dangerous pursuit that often led him down the perilous path of gambling and into the murky waters of trouble. In their village, social norms were deeply ingrained, with a strong emphasis on family reputation. People knew everyone's business, and any hint of scandal or impropriety could cast a long, dark shadow, not just over an individual, but over the entire family. Anya, however, harbored a secret dream, one that defied the expected trajectory of marrying a local man and raising a family. She yearned for Seoul, for its vibrant art scene, for the freedom to study painting and become an artist. It was a dream she nurtured in secret, a stark contrast to the life laid out before her. Her daily routine was a tapestry, woven with domestic duties and stolen moments of artistic expression. She'd rise with the sun, helping her mother prepare breakfast for the guest house. Guests, the rhythmic chop of vegetables and the sizzle of the pan a familiar symphony. Later, she'd clean the rooms, ensuring every corner was spotless, a testament to her family's hospitality. But in her free moments, when the chores were done and the guests were settled, she would slip away to her favorite spot by the stream, her sketchbook and charcoal her most prized possessions. There, surrounded by the whispering willows and the gurgling water, she would lose herself in her art, capturing the ephemeral beauty of her world. She was resourceful, resilient, and independent, even within the confines of her traditional life. Mr. Kim's world, the urban, ruthless underworld of Seoul, was a distant, almost mythical place to Anya. It was the big city, a place of endless possibilities and hidden dangers, where people like her brother went to get lost and make bad decisions. She had only heard whispers of powerful crime syndicates, shadowy figures who controlled vast empires, never imagining that her life would become irrevocably intertwined with one. Subtle tensions, however, had long since begun to fray the edges of their seemingly peaceful existence. Her mother's sighs, heavy with unspoken worry about Jinwoo's latest disappearance, became more frequent. Anya would sometimes sketch in secret, feeling a pang of guilt for not being fully engaged in her chores, yet unable to resist the pull of her art. The financial strain on the family, a slow, insidious creep, grew visibly with each passing month. One evening, the tension solidified into a tangible fear. Jinwoo stumbled home late, his clothes disheveled, his eyes hollow. He spoke in hushed, desperate tones to their mother, asking for money, which she, with a heavy heart and a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, reluctantly gave him. Anya watched from the shadows, a cold knot forming in her stomach. This, she knew, was the precursor, the slow, agonizing prelude to the debt that would eventually lead her to Mr. Kim's formidable office. Jinwoo's gambling problem, initially dismissed as a youthful folly, began its insidious descent into a full-blown addiction, slowly but surely unraveling the delicate fabric of their family life. It started innocently enough, with small, seemingly harmless bets, with friends in the village, the kind of casual wagers that were part of local camaraderie. But the thrill, the fleeting promise of easy money, soon lured him to bigger, more serious games in the city, drawing him into the orbit of ruthless loan sharks. He tried to hide it, of course, a desperate charade he maintained for a time. Yet the signs were unmistakably clear to Anya and her parents. The late nights that stretched into early mornings, the desperate hushed phone calls made from secluded corners of the guest house, the unexplained absences that sometimes lasted for days. Slowly, inexorably, the family's modest savings, painstakingly accumulated over years, began to dwindle, siphoned away to feed Jinwoo's insatiable habit. Anya's parents, their faces etched with worry, tried repeatedly to intervene. They would sit him down, their voices pleading, their eyes filled with a mixture of love and despair, urging him to change his ways, to recognize the pain he was inflicting upon them. But Jinwoo, caught in the grip of his addiction, would brush them off with fleeting promises of reform, assurances that he would turn a new leaf, promises that inevitably crumbled under the weight of his next gambling urge. Anya herself, seeing her parents' heartbreak, tried to reason with him. She appealed to his fading sense of responsibility for the family, reminding him of their honor, their struggles, their dreams. But her words were met with anger and dismissiveness, a cold wall of resentment that pushed her away. He would snap at her, accusing her of meddling, of not understanding his struggles, effectively shutting down any attempt she made to reach him. The humiliation Jinwoo brought upon their family was a heavy burden, scarring their reputation within the close-knit village community. There was one particularly painful incident when he borrowed a significant sum from a respected village elder, promising to repay it quickly, only to default, disappearing for weeks. The shame of it forced Anya's mother, her back bent with sorrow and mortification, to visit the elder's home, bowing deeply, her apologies echoing the family's disgrace. Anya watched, her heart aching for her mother, for the public dishonor that Jinwoo so carelessly inflicted. Another time, Jinwoo had promised to help Anya prepare for her art school application, an opportunity that meant everything to her. He was supposed to review her portfolio, offer constructive criticism, be her support. But true to his pattern, he disappeared for days, leaving her feeling not just betrayed, but utterly alone in her pursuit. Her dreams feeling increasingly fragile. The loan sharks Jinwoo had entangled himself with were not the local, relatively benign lenders of the village. They were implicitly connected to larger, more sinister organizations operating out of Seoul. While Mr. Kim wasn't yet directly involved, the mounting debt was clearly moving towards his sphere of influence, a dark cloud gathering on their horizon. One chilling evening, a rough-looking man, his face a mask of menace, came to the guest house, asking for Jinwoo. He spoke in a low, gravelly voice, leaving a thinly veiled warning about the consequences of unpaid debts. Anya, hidden behind a half-closed door, overheard every word. The man's eyes, cold and devoid of empathy, met hers for a fleeting moment before he turned and left, leaving behind a palpable sense of dread. Her fear, already a constant companion, began to grow, hardening into a cold, knotting sensation deep within her stomach. Anya's cherished dreams of art school, once a vibrant beacon of hope, now felt increasingly impossible, overshadowed by the encroaching darkness. She saw her parents, once so robust, visibly aging under the relentless burden of worry, their laughter replaced by hushed conversations and weary sighs. She felt trapped, a helpless observer as her family slowly, agonizingly, crumbled because of her brother's reckless choices. The initial, shocking encounter with Mr. Kim wasn't a sudden, out-of-the-blue event. It was, instead, the painful, inevitable culmination of years of this slow, agonizing decline, the final, desperate act in a tragedy that had been unfolding before her eyes for far too long. Jinwoo disappeared for what felt like an eternity, weeks stretching into an agonizing silence that was more terrifying than any direct threat. Then the inevitable hammer blow fell. A group of intimidating men, their suits sharp and their faces devoid of emotion, arrived at the guest house. These were not the local thugs, the rough-around-the-edges types who had occasionally come looking for Jinwoo. These men exuded an air of cold, calculated power, clearly representing a major syndicate, an organization far beyond anything the village had ever encountered. They delivered their stark message with chilling precision. Jinwoo's debt, they explained, had been consolidated. It was no longer scattered among various loan sharks. It was now entirely owed to Mr. Kim's formidable organization. The amount they named was astronomical, a sum that dwarfed any fear Anya had previously harbored. They gave the family 1 week to pay, a seemingly impossible deadline, or face severe consequences. Their words were veiled, but the implication was clear. Violence, the loss of their cherished family home, and complete ruin. Anya, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, knew she couldn't simply stand by. Driven by a desperate, primal urge to save her family, she embarked on a frantic search for Jinwoo. She tracked him through the labyrinthine streets of Seoul, her small-town innocence clashing with the city's harsh realities, until she finally found him in a dingy, smoke-filled gambling den. He was barely recognizable, a ghost of his former self, his eyes hollow and defeated. She confronted him, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and raw desperation, begging him to take responsibility, to find a way, any way, to pay back the monstrous debt. He was a broken man, scared and utterly defeated, admitting that he had lost everything, that he was utterly powerless to help. In a moment of weakness, a disturbing implication slipped from his lips. He suggested Anya could do something to help the family, a phrase loaded with unspoken horrors. But the fury in Anya's eyes, the sheer force of her unspoken outrage, made him quickly retract the suggestion, his gaze dropping in shame. Anya returned home, not just defeated but utterly heartbroken. She tried, with every fiber of her being, to convey the true severity of the situation to her parents. She explained that this was no longer a local matter, that the syndicate was ruthless, and that the consequences were dire. But her parents, perhaps out of a desperate, ingrained denial, refused to fully grasp the gravity of it. They clung to the irrational hope that Jinwoo would miraculously fix it, that somehow everything would just go back to normal. They were too proud, or perhaps too terrified, to seek help from other family members, fearing the immense shame it would bring. Calling the police was unthinkable. It would only invite more trouble, more scrutiny, and further tarnish their already fragile family honor. They were paralyzed by fear and tradition, leaving Anya feeling isolated and utterly alone in her understanding of the impending doom. The week passed with agonizing slowness, each day a ticking clock towards their inevitable ruin. Then, just as promised, Mr. Kim's right-hand man arrived. This time, it wasn't the anonymous thugs. It was Director Park, a man whose presence commanded respect and instilled a quiet dread. He was impeccably dressed, calm, professional, and utterly ruthless in his demeanor. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make threats. His quiet authority was far more chilling. He presented the final demand. The guest house, their ancestral home, would be seized. The family would be ruined, stripped of everything they held dear, unless an alternative solution could be found. He mentioned, almost as an aside, that Jinwoo was unavailable for a long time, a euphemism that sent a shiver down Anya's spine, hinting at a fate far worse than mere imprisonment. Anya looked at her parents, their faces etched with despair, their shoulders slumped in defeat. She saw the imminent loss of everything they had worked for, everything that defined them. In that moment, a cold clarity washed over her. She realized, with a horrifying certainty, that no one else could or would save her family. Director Park, his eyes like chips of ice, subtly mentioned that there might be other ways to settle such a debt, his gaze pointedly lingering on Anya. It was a silent, horrifying proposition, but one that Anya understood instantly. The decision, though heartbreaking and soul-crushing, became agonizingly clear. It was either her body, her life, or the complete and utter destruction of her entire family. The choice in that moment felt no choice at all. Anya was taken to Seoul, a journey that felt less like travel and more like an abduction into an alien world. The contrast between her quiet village, steeped in the scent of pine and the rhythm of rice paddies, and the sprawling, cacophonous, intimidating metropolis was overwhelming. She was brought to a luxurious apartment, a penthouse suspended high above the city, far grander than anything she had ever seen, or even dared to imagine. Its opulence, however, felt less like comfort and more like a gilded cage. For the initial days, she was alone, except for the silent, efficient staff who moved like ghosts through the expansive rooms. Fear was her constant companion, a cold knot in her stomach, coupled with a crushing uncertainty about her fate. She quickly realized that she wasn't just pretending to be a wife. She was entering a world of immense power, pervasive danger, and strict unspoken rules she was yet to fully comprehend. Being inherently observant and possessing a sharp, intuitive intelligence, Anya began to watch Mr. Kim. She studied him, not with the curiosity of an outsider, but with the focused intensity of someone whose survival depended on understanding every nuance. She learned his routines, the precise time he left for his office, the hours he kept, the quiet moments he preferred for contemplation. She noted his preferences, the specific blend of tea he favored, the way he liked his shirts pressed, the subtle shift in his mood when a certain dish was served. She observed how he interacted with his staff, a quiet command that bordered on reverence, and with his business associates, a blend of shrewd calculation and veiled threat. She saw the subtle cues of respect and, more potently, the fear he commanded from everyone in his orbit. Without direct involvement, she began to piece together fragments of information about the syndicate's operations, overhearing hushed conversations in the hallways, catching glimpses of cryptic documents left carelessly on a desk, or reading between the lines of the terse phone calls he made. Anya realized that to merely survive, to simply exist as a pawn, was not enough. To truly navigate this treacherous new world, she needed to adapt, to become indispensable. She used her artistic eye, her innate sense of aesthetics and detail, to transform herself. She voraciously consumed fashion magazines, studying the latest trends, the subtle art of dressing for power and influence. She meticulously practiced etiquette, learning the intricate social dances of Seoul's elite. Recognizing the international scope of Mr. Kim's dealings, she began to teach herself Japanese and Chinese, languages often spoken in hushed tones during crucial meetings. She spent hours in front of mirrors, practicing her walk, refining her posture, cultivating a quiet confidence that belied the terror she often felt inside. She understood that her physical presence, her demeanor, was a weapon, a shield, and a tool. She actively constructed her wife persona, a carefully curated facade designed to blend seamlessly into Mr. Kim's world. She started making small, thoughtful gestures, remembering his favorite brand of imported coffee, anticipating his need for a specific document before he even asked, ensuring his study was always precisely as he preferred it. She learned to read people, especially the diverse array of characters who frequented Mr. Kim's apartment. The slick politicians, the intimidating enforcers, the shrewd businessmen. She cultivated a reputation as an elegant, quiet, and intelligent woman who was always by Mr. Kim's side, never overstepping her perceived role, but always undeniably present. Her silence, initially a sign of her fear, became an asset, interpreted as dignified reserve. Anya, with a nascent cunning she hadn't known she possessed, began to use her perceived innocence and outsider status to her advantage. She would ask seemingly naive questions during casual conversations at dinner, questions that often, by accident or design, revealed crucial pieces of information about the syndicate's complex power dynamics or hidden weaknesses. She carefully cultivated relationships with some of the household staff, particularly the older women who had seen much and heard more. Through them, she gathered snippets of gossip, fragments of information that, when pieced together, painted a clearer picture of the intricate web of alliances and rivalries that defined Mr. Kim's world. She became a silent collector of secrets. Mr. Kim, a man not easily impressed or swayed, observed her transformation with a growing, if subtle, interest. He saw her intelligence, her remarkable adaptability, and a quiet, unexpected strength that surprised him. He began to rely on her in small ways, initially asking for her opinions on minor domestic matters, then gradually on more significant ones, related to his public image or social engagements. While the pretend aspect of their arrangement remained the unspoken foundation, a different kind of respect began to form between them, a silent acknowledgement of her capabilities, her astute observations, and her ability to navigate his dangerous world with an almost unnerving grace. The suspense built with each passing day, as Anya found herself getting closer to understanding Mr. Kim's true nature, and more frighteningly, the potential power she might unknowingly wield within this dangerous, unpredictable world. The story now returns to a grand event, a glittering spectacle, much like the one that first introduced Anya to Mr. Kim's world, but with a crucial difference. This time, Anya was not an overwhelmed, frightened girl. She moved with a newfound poise and an undeniable confidence, her every step deliberate and assured. It was a high-stakes gathering, a nexus of power where the city's most influential business figures mingled with the shadowy heads of various syndicates, including Mr. Kim's most formidable rivals. Anya was, as always, by Mr. Kim's side, a vision of elegance and composure, playing the part of his devoted wife with a chilling perfection. Mr. Kim, radiating an aura of absolute control, felt secure with Anya by his side. He was at the pinnacle of his power, a king in his domain. He announced a major deal, a strategic maneuver designed to solidify his power base and expand his empire. A deal he believed was absolutely airtight, impervious to any challenge. A subtle, almost imperceptible smirk played on his lips as he cast a glance towards a prominent rival. A silent jab, a display of his characteristic arrogance. He was so consumed by his own perceived invincibility that he failed to notice the subtle shift in the air, the almost imperceptible ripple of change that Anya had meticulously orchestrated. During the elaborate event, amidst the clinking of glasses and the murmur of powerful conversations, Anya subtly executed her meticulously planned move. She drew upon the vast reservoir of information she had painstakingly gathered over the past year. Every overheard conversation, every misplaced document, every seemingly insignificant detail. With a practiced grace, she accidentally left a coded message on a side table, a seemingly innocuous note that, to a rival's trained eye, would reveal a critical vulnerability in Mr. Kim's grand deal. Or perhaps, with a delicate sleight of hand, she misplaced a document, ensuring it fell into the hands of someone who would understand its true significance, exposing a fatal flaw in Mr. Kim's strategy. She might have also chosen a more direct, yet equally subtle approach, engaging in a seemingly innocent conversation with a key player, planting a seed of doubt, or revealing a hidden truth that would unravel Mr. Kim's carefully constructed narrative. Her actions were precise, calculated, and utterly devastating in their potential. The consequences of Anya's actions began to unfold with a terrifying speed. A prominent rival, his eyes suddenly sharp with a new understanding, stepped forward and challenged Mr. Kim's claims, presenting evidence that directly contradicted the validity of his deal. A ripple of whispers spread through the opulent room, growing in intensity, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Mr. Kim's confident demeanor, once so unshakable, began to crack, a visible fissure appearing in his facade of control. He knew, with a dawning horror, that something was profoundly wrong, that his carefully laid plans were crumbling around him. Yet he couldn't, for the life of him, pinpoint the source of the sabotage. He scanned the room, his eyes narrowed, searching for the betrayer, utterly blind to the true architect of his downfall. As the lucrative deal collapsed around him, his empire momentarily shaken, Mr. Kim's gaze, filled with a mixture of confusion and dawning suspicion, finally fell upon Anya. Her expression was calm, almost serene, a picture of tranquil innocence, but there was a glint in her eye, a flicker of something he had never seen before. A quiet triumph, a steel resolve. In that moment, a cold, undeniable realization washed over him. He understood, with a sickening certainty, that the quiet, seemingly submissive girl he had brought into his dangerous world, the girl he had underestimated so thoroughly, had been playing a much deeper, far more sophisticated game all along. The debt, her family's crushing burden, was indeed settled, but not in the way he had ever intended. It was paid, not with her subservience, but with his humiliation, his power diminished by the very person he had sought to control. The aftermath stretched into months, a quiet, almost imperceptible tremor that continually reshaped the landscape of Seoul's underworld. Mr. Kim's syndicate, though not utterly destroyed, was significantly weakened. The Grand Deal's collapse had caused a substantial loss of face, a critical blow in a world built on reputation and fear. His power, once absolute and unchallenged, was now openly contested by ambitious rivals who saw his vulnerability. He understood Anya's pivotal role in his downfall, a bitter pill to swallow, yet there was also a grudging respect for her cunning, her audacity. The unspoken agreement between them, the pretense of marriage, was officially dissolved, the debt unequivocally paid, though the currency had been far more valuable than mere money. Anya, however, was no longer the fearful girl from the quiet village of Gangwon-do. The crucible of the past year had forged her into an entirely new person. She had matured beyond her years, shedding the naivete of her youth, gaining an immense, unshakable confidence. Her mind, always sharp, had been honed into a strategic instrument, capable of dissecting complex situations and orchestrating intricate plans. She possessed a wisdom born of navigating the treacherous currents of power and deception. With the significant funds she had quietly amassed, funds acquired through careful, almost invisible maneuvers, during her time as Mr. Kim's wife, she was able to secure her family's future beyond their wildest dreams. The guest house was safe, the debts erased, and a new life, free from the shadow of Jinwoo's mistakes, awaited them. Her deepest aspiration, the dream that had seemed so impossibly distant, was now within reach. Anya set up her own art studio in a vibrant, bustling part of Seoul, a space filled with light and inspiration, far removed from the dimly lit offices and opulent yet stifling penthouses. Here, surrounded by canvases and the scent of paint, she finally pursued her passion, her brushstrokes now imbued with a newfound depth and freedom, reflecting the tumultuous journey she had undertaken. Her art was no longer just an escape. It was an expression of her resilience, her strength, her very soul. The reconciliation with her family was a profound and healing process. They were safe, financially secure, and free from the constant dread that had plagued them for years. Jinwoo, humbled by his ordeal and the severe consequences of his actions, was a changed man. He was genuinely trying to reform, working diligently to make amends, a quiet shadow of his former reckless self. Anya's parents, their faces etched with relief and pride, expressed their gratitude not just for the financial salvation, but for the strong, independent woman their daughter had become. They saw not a victim, but a survivor, a heroine who had navigated unimaginable dangers to protect them. Anya often reflected on her extraordinary journey, a path she would never have chosen, yet one that had irrevocably shaped her. She had learned invaluable lessons, truths that transcended the confines of the underworld. She understood now that true power wasn't always about brute force or overt intimidation. It was, more often than not, about intelligence, about adaptability, about the nuanced understanding of human nature, its desires, its weaknesses, its predictable patterns. She realized that even in the darkest, most oppressive circumstances, one could find agency, could carve out a space for self-determination, and ultimately redefine their own destiny. Her experience had taught her that even a pawn, if clever enough, could become the queen. The story culminates with Anya in her studio, bathed in the soft, natural light filtering through the large windows. Her hand, no longer trembling with fear, moved with confident, fluid strokes across a large canvas, bringing to life a vibrant, complex landscape. She paused, stepping back to admire her work, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. She looked out her studio window at the sprawling, bustling city below, a metropolis that had once threatened to consume her, but which she had ultimately conquered. She was free, independent, and fiercely self-possessed, ready for whatever new challenges and triumphs the future might hold. From the most unlikely and dangerous of beginnings, she had not just survived, she had truly begun to live, crafting her own masterpiece, a life of her own design.